Hey folks, Pro Libertate, thanks again for watching. Um, this is where I just talk about what I feel like. Philosophy, history, theology, politics, and in this case, movies and art. And farming once in a while. I'll be getting into that. You can hear my roosters, waking up here. It's early in the morning here in the south, and just a glorious time to sit out on the porch and, you know, just have a smoke a pipe and just enjoy the sunrise. So in the previous video that I put up, I talked about my favorite movie of 2019, and this is going to be the opposite video. This is the biggest disappointment in film in 2019, and that would be Game of Thrones season 8. And this is not one that took me by surprise. I knew that the show writing was going down and going down fast, particularly with season 7. That's where I picked up on it. I was like, okay, this is not good anymore. Season 6 was probably the last decent one, and the others I thought were all good. There's people who had their finger on the pulse and were complaining about the decline in writing much earlier, but season 7 and 8 is where the decline in quality was most noticeable, and 8 was just atrocious, absolutely atrocious. This story had the chance of being one of the greats. Right? I remember commenting to my wife as we were into the story, and I've read through the books and all that, and I remember commenting to my wife saying, this has a chance of becoming my favorite story. But I think they're gonna blow it, and they did. So Tolkien, you still are the king on the Iron Throne for me. Lord of the Rings and the Middle Earth stories are still on the throne as I think my favorite stories as far as fiction goes. And Martin had a chance, and these guys had a chance. The show started off just fantastic. Again, there's a lot of crude stuff, nudity in the show. So if you're planning to watch it and you haven't watched any of this stuff, just beware of that. Be alert to that. Honestly, what my wife and I did, we just put on. We have a service, VidAngel, who's been under they've been under fire for a while right now, but it just cut out the nudity. I mean, it's really not necessary. I mean, the sex scenes don't add anything. You can just know that these two people are now a couple. They're having sex. Okay, that's all you need to know. I don't need to see all that. Okay, it's really just not necessary. And they throw it in there because it's culturally subversive, right? It's so anyway, that's neither here nor there. Season 8 has really been piled on, and you can see it here on the Rotten Tomatoes score. The critics, yet again, they're such freaking lackeys. They're such lackeys. They're such lackeys that they actually gave it 60%. I mean, that's low, but it's not as low as it really should be. This was just plain awful. Just plain awful. And the audience score reflects that. It's 32% give it a positive review. It was just plain awful. There's no getting around that. And this season 8 has been thoroughly trashed, on YouTube for months and months. And I will gladly, lend my voice to the chorus. It was terrible. It starts off the first two, and I knew it was going to be awful as soon as I saw the first episode. The first episode starts off, it's like a reunion in Winterfell, right? And the whole episode was really just a fan service episode where it was, hey, remember And again, there's going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen it and you want to see it and you haven't watched it yet and you don't want to hear spoilers, time to tap out. I'm just telling you it's awful, though. Leave it at that. Tap out right now. Anyway, moving on. So, episode 1 starts off, and it's this Winterfell reunion, and so it's like all these little nostalgic flashbacks of, oh, remember Arya and the Hound? Oh, here they are together again. Oh, remember, Sansa and what the heck is his name? The guy who was made into a eunuch, basically. The Ironborn guy. Remember them? Here they are together again. And so it's all these sorts of like little reunions. Oh, remember when Jaime pushed Bran out of the window? Oh, here they are meeting each other again. That was actually in episode 2, I believe. Remember Jaime and Brienne together? Oh, here they are together again. And all these sorts of things. And it was just clearly fan service, clearly lazy. And it was an episode that didn't really do anything. And again, I said to my wife after that, this is going to be a disaster. And each episode, in my estimation, just got progressively worse. So Dany has this forced conflict with Arya or Sansa over how things should be governed and all of this sort of stuff. There's this artificial conflict being, made between the two, and the dialogue between them is just so choppy and forced. It's just, it's like, oh, come on. Can you get some decent writers here to put this together? But no, it was rushed, sloppy, and just dashed off. And I believe it was episode 2 where one of the scenes where they were all gathered around in Winterfell, there was a Starbucks cup on the table that the editing crew missed in the editing room. That shows you how rushed and sloppy this was. That they actually went with a scene where there's a Starbucks cup. This is supposed to be like a medieval-esque type show, right? Medieval fantasy world, right? And there's a freaking Starbucks cup there. Sloppy, just lazy writing. And so 7 seasons have been building up to this point where there's a conflict with these White Walkers, which are like these ice zombies basically, and they're led by this ice zombie king, the Night King. And so the 7 seasons have been building up to the conflict with the undead and the living. And it all culminates in, I believe, episode 3. And so 7 seasons of build up, one episode of action, and it's done. And the terror of the Night King and winter. 7 seasons of winter is coming, and winter comes, and it's done in an episode. That's the end of that. Moving on. And the way the Night King was killed was just awful. It was a literal Deus Ex Machina scene where Arya just jumps out of literally nowhere and does this knife trick and stabs the Night King, and he dies. Stabs him with the Valyrian steel blade, and that's the end of him. I believe it was Valyrian steel, or was it the dragon stone? I forget. Doesn't really matter. But again, that was the wrong choice. And even the actress who played Arya said that as she read the script. She said to her boyfriend, I just don't know. I'm glad. It's cool that I get that kind of a part, but I feel like it should be Jon. Right? The guy who's had the most contact with these people, he should have been the one. But no. So they give it to Arya. And so she kills the Night King, and that's the end of that. 7 seasons of build-up. Winter is coming. The Night King's coming. The army of the dead is coming. Done. 1 episode. That's the end of that. Moving on. Wrapped that up. And now they need another conflict. So they make Dany go bad. Daenerys Targaryen. You know, reading through the books, she was actually my favorite character. You know, just watching the show, she's not my favorite character on the show. She's, you know, Emilia Clarke is a capable actress. She's just not the best. You know, I don't really care for... I mean, it's a good character. It's not my favorite on the show, but in the books, she's my favorite. And her story, you know, was my favorite storyline. And I'm not saying that they couldn't make her fall. They couldn't make her go evil. But my goodness, you need to do that in more than 2 or 3 episodes. And that's what they did. So 7 seasons of this person being a protagonist, 7 seasons of this person being a liberator, 7 seasons of this person fighting for the oppressed, and in 2 episodes all of that's undone. Just idiotic. Or she loses some people that she's rather close to, and that causes her to become this vengeful person full of bloodlust. It's absurd, and just lazy writing again. And eventually Jon has to kill her after she had slaughtered basically the entire city of King's Landing. And so Jon ends up having to kill her. And that's really the end of Game of Thrones. Jon is banished because of that, and then they put Bran on the throne. So going through it like that, I mean, the storyline is just, it's bad. But what's even worse is just the character arcs and how those were all destroyed in this show. And so the character arc of Jon Snow, that was probably the worst one, how he was basically just destroyed. And he had a wonderful story of being, you know, the bastard son of Ned Stark, only to, in the future, have it revealed over time that he's actually the hidden king. He's actually the heir to the Iron Throne. None of that had any bearing on Season 8. The fact that he's the heir to the throne had nothing to do with anything. So that was all just moot. Again, 7 seasons of build-up about Jon's lineage, out the window. Doesn't matter. So that was wasted. Another waste was Bran. I guess, another waste was Bran. Again, Bran started having his little powers and visions and stuff in Season 2. So in his case, it was about 6 seasons of build-up with Bran and his powers and all of that. I guess it may have started in Season 1, actually. I think it did. So 7 seasons of build-up with Bran and his powers. And they play absolutely zero role in the final season. He not once does he use his powers to achieve anything. Remember, he had the power to warg or go into the body of animals or even other people and control them. He had the power to see what was going on across the world through time. All right? Plays zero role whatsoever in the final season. And I remember before Season 8 began, I was saying to friends who also, you know, watch the show that I just think it's going to be a mess. I don't think they know what to do with Bran, you know, and that became evident, and that they didn't know what to do with him, so they had him do nothing. He just sat around looking stoic the whole time, and then they put him on the Iron Throne because of reasons. It's like, why? Tyrion makes this speech at the end, and they put Bran on the Iron Throne. Who has a better story than Bran? Like, everybody. I mean, unless he did something, then he would have a cool story. If the only thing role he had to play in Season 8 was being bait for the Night King, right? So that was the only actual role he played in accomplishing anything in the story. He was a glorified piece of meat for the rabid dog to chase after. So that was another waste. Let's think of another waste. Other wastes. I can't think of wastes, but characters that were wrecked. Jaime Lannister, another person with a great story. He starts off. I mean, this is the beauty of good writing. If you think about it, Jaime was never actually a fully bad guy. He was a mixed bag. And as the story goes on, you begin to see that there's actually good in this guy. And the reason why he's named Kingslayer is because he killed the previous king. But he killed him because the king was going to kill everybody in the city, like Daenerys eventually does, right? And so Jaime was acting in defense of the people. He was acting in defense of the little guy, right? He stood up for life. He defended life. So he killed the king that lives might be saved, because the king was going to kill everybody, right? And so when that's all revealed, you start to see the turn in Jaime when he loses his sword hand, and he can no longer rely on his skill as a swordsman, to get him out of everything. He's humbled, and he becomes a better person. And and we immediately begin to be sympathetic to Jaime, this guy who we hated for several seasons. We become sympathetic to. It's just fantastic writing. That was very good. And this is why I said this is such a disappointment to have this. And then to end, it was one of the final things with Jaime, when he was captured, I believe. Yeah, he was captured, and he was saying before he was freed, I never really cared much for the people. I'm like, wait a minute. That was like the whole thing. That's what, defined your life. Was because you cared for the people. You killed the king. And now he's saying, I never really cared about the people. Because as Tyrion was telling Jaime, we gotta have the bells rung in King's Landing or something. Because we gotta stop Daenerys, because she's gonna kill everybody in King's Landing if we don't. And Jaime makes that comment, I never really cared about the people. I'm like, the fact that he cared about the people is what has defined his life up until this point, right? He's been called Kingslayer most of his life now, because he killed the king to save the people. It's so idiotic. It's just really unfathomable how sloppy that writing was, and the destruction of his character. Another wasted character was the eunuch Varys. I actually really liked his character a lot. But he was wasted as well. He used to be this really smart, conniving guy throughout the show, and he had these networks of people, and he was able to pull off all sorts of stuff. Well, in the final season, he becomes this clumsy oaf who's no longer clever and able to do all of his subterfuge and basically CIA spook work. All of a sudden, he's just a clumsy oaf, right? And he gets found out and executed. That's the end of that. Tyrion's dialogue becomes really stupid. It was just a thorough waste. And, I remember saying to a friend before the season started, we were all taking guesses of who's going to end up on the throne. And I was like, it's going to be a woman. They're going to put a woman on the throne. They don't want to put a dude on the throne. And I was wrong, but I was right. Because in the end, they put Sansa, they divided the kingdom and put Sansa on the throne. I was like, yeah, of course, yeah. Got to have a woman on the throne at the end, because it's 2019. And, and it wasn't, I was like, they're not going to put Jon on the throne. It should be Jon. but they're not going to do it because that would make too much sense. So they think they're being clever, and so then so if they're going to put a guy on, he's got to have some sort of defect, and so they put Bran on the throne. And Bran's in the wheelchair and all that. So just thoroughly disappointing. It could have been great, and just thoroughly disappointing. For this to have worked, you really need to go back to like redo season 7 and 8. You can't, there was like this petition to redo season 8 of Game of Thrones, and it needs to go beyond that, right? It's not just a problem with one season. It's a problem that started back in season 7, where in previous seasons, travel actually took time, and episodes would show the travels of characters on roads or on the sea, right? That's part of the story. In season 7, all of a sudden you got people just instantaneously teleporting across the world, right? Oh, I think I'm going to go down to King's Landing. The next scene, the guy's in King's Landing. I'm like, wait a minute, that would have taken like a week. So, at least it did in the past. And there was a lot of events that happened on these travels, right? When Robert and Ned Stark and the kids are all going to King's Landing, a lot of stuff happens on that trip. So, anyway, so again, that was probably the most disappointing movie or show of 2019 for me. Leave your thoughts down below if you have anything to contribute, or if you want to suggest another show that was even more disappointing. I'm trying to think. Last Jedi was 2018, so that just missed the cut. That was probably the worst of 2018, hands down, the absolute worst movie of 2018. But this was the worst of 2019, and it was, again, because the show had such promise, had such good writing in the early seasons. It stayed ahead of the audience. It surprised you, and you couldn't believe stuff that would happen. It was so good, so satisfying, and so intelligent. And to see it, be reduced to this boobery basically at the end, it was just disappointing. And there was a water bottle too at in one of the scenes. Again, rushed, sloppy. The guys who put it together, D&D, Benioff and Weiss, they just didn't care anymore, and you can tell. From what I understand, HBO wanted to offer them, I think it was like 10 seasons, and initially they wanted to do it in 7, and then they compromised on 8, and it was initially season 8 was supposed to be, I think it was 6 movie-length episodes. Well, that didn't happen. They're all like regular length episodes. So all these things that were promised were never really delivered. And, HBO probably should have, some overseer should have seen this, screened it, and flushed it, and just redone it with, somebody else. Because obviously these two dudes were no longer interested. They're moving on to do Star Wars stuff, I guess. They obviously just were no longer interested. It's all rushed, it's sloppy, and a great disappointment. All right, thanks again for watching. Comment below, and if you have anything to add, or if you have another movie that you think was, or show that was an even greater disappointment and letdown for fans.